All right, welcome into episode 3 of Denmark and Marsh podcast. It is Monday, the day after the Super Bowl, February 12th. For the ones that don't know, we just started doing a podcast about a week and a half ago. And we're two aspiring broadcasters. We both graduated from the University of Florida in 2020. I'm the producer for Jaguars Today, and I produce Hacker After Dark. Graham does sales and does videos, and we're just putting together this podcast just to do it for the love of the game. And Graham, apparently people actually listened to us. I was talking to RJ before. He says, dude, y'all are good. I was like, oh, really? Really? And then, we go out. We went out to the Riverside bars Saturday. They're like, yo, y'all have got to get a mailbag because I'll be dropping questions. So it's funny, people actually listen to us. But, tell your friends, anybody that's, will be interested. We talk mainly Jags and Gators. Right now, obviously, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl and what we saw yesterday. In any big story, but that's pretty much the main part of our podcast. You can get us on Twitter at 1010XL Denmark, myself, and you can get Graham at 1010XL Graham. The Super Bowl yesterday. The main story is obviously going to be the 49ers, and they pretty much dominated the game. They did everything they could for 3 quarters, and then Mahomes kind of pretty much did what he could. Tied the game at 19, went to overtime. There was a lot of questions on, should the 49ers have give the ball up and got the ball second to know what the Chiefs would have done.
Yes, they should.
I don't have an issue with what San Francisco did.
Oh, I do.
Okay.
So we're going to get into
that. Let's start there. Okay. I felt...
I was like screaming at the TV.
I felt the whole game that Shanahan felt handicapped with Purdy. Like he couldn't do what everyone like Andy Reid could do with Mahomes, obviously. I think the better thing for him to do at the situation would have been to get the ball first and go down the field, which they had been doing. And then once they got in the red zone, obviously they kicked field goal just like they had been doing all game. And I don't have any issue with play calling. You'll lose and everything you do wrong is like amplified even more. Kyle Shanahan called plenty of good plays. Chris Jones just made a handful of plays that disrupted it. Debo was wide open for a touchdown. The run plays that you call on first down, there was a lot of plays where Christian McCaffrey, yes, he had 4, 5, 6 yards a lot of times, a couple of pops, but a lot of times he was getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage. So if you get stuck that line of scrimmage on a 2nd and 9, well, then you're going to be behind the 6 with not a good quarterback that you want to overcome with that.
It also felt like every non-McCaffrey run was a loss of 4.
Yeah.
Debo got a couple of sweeps and stuff. I think he had 1 carry as a running back. They don't do that as much as they used to.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
With McCaffrey being a feature back. But obviously they still find multiple ways to give Debo the ball. It felt like every time Debo was getting the ball, not as a wide receiver, or even as a wide receiver, but as a jet sweep, not a downfield route, he was losing yards. Elijah Mitchell came in the game, had 1 nice run toward the end, and it got called back with a hold.
Yep.
You're right, McCaffrey was getting stuffed, and even when he wasn't getting stuffed, he was the only back that was consistently getting any type of positive yards when he ran the ball. But to talk about the first thing we discussed, I had a huge problem with them kicking it off. Listen, this is my opinion, and you can agree or disagree with it however much you want. I think Kyle Shanahan hadn't really fully thought that through.
Yeah, and you could tell through his players.
You could tell it was very, very, very obvious once overtime started which team was prepared for the new overtime rules and which team was not. And it started with that. It started with the 49ers winning the coin toss in overtime, receiving the ball, and it's very similar to college overtime now. Like we've a lot of people have discussed this. There's some ways it's different because it's a further field. You don't get to start like you do in college, right outside the red zone. But I gotta believe that this was the first year. This was the first year, right, that these overtime rules were in place. I gotta believe moving forward, no team is gonna be receiving the ball if they go to overtime in the playoffs. It doesn't make sense. When you watch the Chiefs' game-winning drive, there were multiple instances in that drive where they benefited from knowing exactly what they needed to do. If that was the first drive of overtime and the Niners hadn't gotten the ball yet. That 4th and 1 play where they went for it, for the game.
They got a punt.
They would have punted the ball.
Yeah.
But instead, they go for it with Mahomes. They get it. A couple minutes later, they're Super Bowl champions. And I don't know if you saw on ESPN after the game, Chris Berman and Booger McFarland had
most of it.
Yeah, they had Mahomes and Kelsey on. And I was glad that Chris Berman was making a pretty big deal out of it, because I felt like at the time, the broadcast didn't make a big enough deal out of it during the game, and I felt like immediately after, you're kind of focused on different things. You're focused on them raising the Lombardi and stuff. But I felt like it hadn't been a huge topic, at least yet, and Berman was like really hitting it home. And he asked Mahomes about it, and he said, yeah, if we had won the toss, we were going to defer. So I just felt like one team was clearly more prepared when it came to overtime, and they have Patrick Mahomes. If they could have played, it felt like that the actual game could have been played 10 times, and it would have been like a coin flip who won.
Yeah.
But it felt like that overtime could have been played 10 times, and the Chiefs would have won 10 times.
I will say this. Just say for the sake of argument that the Chiefs get the ball first, they go down the field to get a touchdown. Do you have any confidence that Brock Purdy will lead you down the field, down trailing 7?
Yes.
You do. See, I differ there.
Okay. Do I have any confidence? Yes. Do I think it for sure would have happened? Like, no, it's not 100%, obviously. It's not like Mahomes going down the field, of course not. But if you're telling me that Kyle Shanahan and his offense, when he knows he's got to go down the field to score, he's got 4 downs every single time, because you know they're going to go for it regardless because they have to score a touchdown. I feel pretty confident there's at least like maybe a coin flip chance they go score, versus when they don't know, I feel like there's now a less than 50% chance they score because of the fact that on 4th downs, they're more likely to punt or kick a field goal. I feel like, Andy Reid after the game was asked about it as well by Chris Berman, and Reid did the coach thing, the politically correct thing that a coach is going to say, which is, everybody's got their own philosophy, whatever. And it was, Andy Reid was not going to say.
Yeah, he ain't going to tell you everything.
He's not going to say, wow, I can't believe Kyle Shanahan
those guys
did
are
that.
idiots.
Yeah, he's not going to say that. But I don't believe in what Andy Reid said there. Again, it's politically correct, and I don't think he even means what he said, with every coach has their own philosophy, whatever. I'm telling you, I don't believe this is going to be a way that coaches attack this moving forward. I don't see a world where a bunch of coaches are going to receive the ball in overtime now in the playoffs, because it's not advantageous. In my opinion, it's not advantageous at all.
No, it's not. And that's how it went down. And also another thing, Mahomes didn't play well the first 3 quarters. Like, part of it being him, part of it, like Scott Moore drops the ball. The first 3, like halftime, neither team had 50 yards rushing. Mahomes comes out to start the second half. He has a bad pitch to Pacheco. Pacheco fumbles the ball. That's on Mahomes on that flip. And then 2 plays later, he throws an interception. Now, the 49ers didn't do anything with it. But then you got the 4th quarter, and it's just like, okay, this is Mahomes. This is what he's going to do. Like, you know that you knew eventually that they were going to catch something and get it rolling. And you get to the 4th quarter. The 4th quarter, Jawan Jennings gets his touchdown. I forget how the sequence of events happened. It was 4th and 3. Kittle gets the first down. I was like, whoa, that's pretty big. I would have kicked the field goal. They go down. The Chiefs then, after the 49ers didn't get that first down, and McDuffie tips the ball, I'm thinking Mahomes probably not going to go down, get a touchdown, might get a field goal. And they end up getting the field goal. And then they go to overtime. By the way,
they were damn close to getting the touchdown, too.
Yeah, multiple times. I mean, the Chiefs, I think I saw they had 6 trips to the red zone and only had 2 touchdowns. Like, that's crazy. And then the 49ers, too.
It was a struggle. Both teams were struggling in the red zone all game.
Yeah.
It was a tough.
And both defenses were really, we talked about it last week. Like, the Niners defense, we were like, like the Packers did what they wanted, the Lions did what they wanted. Now, granted, that's not how it works, but if it went to halftime, Bosa would have been your MVP. Like, he was playing out of his mind. Chase Young disappeared the second half.
Right.
Fred Warner, oh my gosh, he was playing out of his mind. But
And if Dre Greenlaw doesn't get hurt, I think the Niners win the game.
yeah, you got a different game, you know.
I think they end up winning.
I kind of want to talk about this. So last week we talked about Shanahan, and you know, he'd probably get labeled as a guy that can't win the big game if he doesn't. Obviously, it happened. I don't think this is anything that has to do with Shanahan, and you know, you can dispute on what he did here and there about the overtime and some of the play calls. People want to base everything on a result, and I think this is the coach in me that says this too much. Deebo Samuel's running wide open down the right sideline, and Chris Jones just makes a great play. If you look at the third and 4, that was in overtime. Ayuk's running wide open, and they leave Chris Jones unblocked. I'm sure you heard on ESPN after the game, he's talking about Boomer. He goes, I thought it was a screen. I was just left unblocked because there was somebody coming from the outside. I forget who it was blocking him. Goes to block him outside, and then Chris Jones runs free. Ayuk's running naked. That's a touchdown. You can't consider the muffed punt. The Chiefs score right after that. The extra point, that's 8 points that you can't get back. There was a lot of things in that game that coaching you just can't account for as a coach, that you can't for on the field. And also, you know, I thought Pat Mahomes was just better. Like, there's nothing you can do. He was just better.
I also think something that happens, I think it kind of happened a little bit in the 2019 Super Bowl as well, when the Chiefs and Niners played, and I especially thought it showed up last night. Kyle Shanahan has had a lot of teams that have been so good, and by NFL standards, they dominate the regular season. Dominate. Like, I mean, there was a stretch this year where they were just murdering every team they played. And they didn't lose much. I know they got humbled by the Ravens, and then they had that 3-game losing skid.
Yeah,
but besides that, most of the season, they just beat the hell out of
Well, and remember,
played.
The Jags and the Niners had a bye week at the same time, and then a lot of people, I remember listening to some San Fran radio, they were like, we don't know like what this team is. And then they got back on track when they played us, and they beat us 34-3.
And I think what happens is I think Shanahan's teams, because it might just be a result of playing less close games than like the Chiefs have been in a lot of close games this year. Even the Jags game when they came here was a relatively close game. I mean, you still weren't sure who was going to win like 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I think it was it 13-0, 13-3 at the half?
Yeah.
And then Kittle had that big play to start the second half.
Well, the Niners game, yeah. The Niners murdered the Jags, but I'm saying the Chiefs game, like the second week of the season. The Chiefs were kind of in the driver's seat the whole game, but the Jags were all like, it never really felt like they were going to come back and win, but it was like always mathematically possible until like 4 minutes left. They were never getting like killed. Versus, you know, perfect example, the Niners, the Jags were getting killed. So the Chiefs, they've played a lot of close games like that this year. So I just think that in those tight situations, when every little thing matters, and literally every player on the field can be the difference, I just felt like the Chiefs were more prepared for that. I felt like the Niners I felt like there was all this pressure because it's the Super Bowl and it's a tight game, obviously. It's the most pressure you're ever going to feel as a football player. And I got the sense that the Niners felt the pressure more than the Chiefs did. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? And then I felt like, back to the overtime thing, and other things as well, just the little details were why the Chiefs won throughout the game that added up, right? And also, the Niners had most of the momentum most of the game, I would say. Through about 3 quarters, they were clearly the better team, but they were only up 7.
Yeah.
Man, if Patrick Mahomes is on the other side of the field,
within striking distance,
and you've got all the momentum, you got to get up by more than 7, man. Because you know that the minute something happens, the minute that they make a play, they get a turnover, they get a big play, what have you, you know they're coming. And you're going to want to have more than a 7-point cushion. I kept saying that the whole time I was watching the game with my fiance Mal, who you know very well, and she's like, man, like the Niners are killing them. Like, this game's going to be over. And I'm like, if this is only a 7-point game, Patrick Mahomes is going to come back and win. And it was a 10-point game earlier than that. But I'm like, coming back from 10-point deficits is like, that's what Patrick Mahomes does for a living.
Yeah, and I think that's what, they got to halftime. I think Boomer asked both Kelsey and Mahomes, like, dude, we've been here like how many times now? Like every playoff game. If you go back, the last couple of years, they were down to the Texans 24-0 and won. The following week, they were down big. I think it was like, I forget who it was. They were down like 20 points. Didn't happen really this postseason. They led every game, but throughout the regular season, like they trailed the Raiders. They didn't come back, but they talked about everything that happened this year and how it just didn't faze them. And part of it's just that championship DNA. If you've done it before, there's nothing to panic about. You talked about the Niners and the impressing is with Brock Purdy. What surprised me with Purdy. And you hear this from a lot of past players, like in their first Super Bowl, a lot of them will tell you like they just black out the first quarter, like they don't remember nothing. I thought he played outstanding. Like both quarterbacks, I think Mahomes started 8 for 9. Purdy was about the same. Now, they didn't take any deep shots or anything like that, but he was very composed in what he did. I don't know. I thought the Niners, and it just sucks for the Niners. You couldn't have had a better game plan. You couldn't have had executed. Some things didn't go your way, and yet you still fall short. And this is the worst the Chiefs are probably going to be for the next 2-3 years.
I was listening to a podcast today about it. They were just recapping stuff and whatever, and I agreed with something that one of the guys said, that if you're a Niners fan today, most likely the thing that stings most is that extra point getting blocked.
Yeah, because then Kansas City's got to go for the touchdown.
Yeah, and I think now listen, is there still a really good chance that Mahomes takes them down and scores a touchdown and it doesn't matter? Yeah, that's pretty possible. But to not even give your defense that played really, really well a lot of that game a chance to do that, like. Whew, That's the one that would hurt me. If that were the Jags, that'd be the one thing where I'm like, we got a freaking extra point block from the Super Bowl, man. Like that's just like that's the one, and I couldn't agree more with what he said about like that's the one thing that would just irk me, man. Like you're playing Mahomes, he's great. He could be the GOAT one day. Like those conversations are starting to be had more. And my kicker's getting an extra point block.
Yeah, and what's funny was like. The Niners are the favorites somehow. And you look at, all right, who's got the coaching advantage? Andy Reid. Who's got the quarterback advantage? Mahomes. The kicker advantage, easily Kansas City. And then you go into the game and like Moody makes a 55-yarder and he has confidence in like any of his kicks. And then something small like that happens. And, I was at a coaching clinic. I heard Sarkisian, Mike Norvell, and Mac Brown from North Carolina talk. And they all talked about like all of the little details that like, that matters so much. We talked about, starting with camp and how everybody's so time oriented and everything is like this and you get in a game and it's like something that little can determine the outcome in such a huge game. I'm a high school coach and extra point is like just whatever, all right, I'm gonna just block down if I get beat, whatever. That was, you'll never know what Kansas City would have been able to do. Had that in that late game, but those 8 points are the reason why Kansas City won.
Yeah. And then also something else I want to talk about in regards to like it's the preparation, but I feel like it's also what the term you said, championship DNA, and it's also just Mahomes being Mahomes. There's a lot of factors going into it, but that entire last drive for the Chiefs in overtime for the Chiefs to go down and win the game. One of the main things I kept like finding myself noticing was just play after play with Mahomes. I'm like, man, think about how many quarterbacks would have ruined this chance. Think about how many quarterbacks would not have done what he did. Like, I thought back to one particular play that wasn't like a super flashy play, but I think they got a first down on it. They're past the 50 on that drive. They're moving the ball. I want to say it's maybe second or third down. And Mahomes, you might remember what I'm talking about. Mahomes is back in the pocket, Pocket's starting to collapse a little bit. He steps up, and he kind of cocks back like he's going to launch it for a second. Like half a second, I think he's going to throw it deep. And then he decides not to, dumps it off, I think, to McKinnon, and he gets first down. And I'm like, man, I immediately thought of when they played the Ravens and Lamar threw that awful interception into like triple coverage.
In the red zone, in the end zone.
Right. And I'm like, man, how good do you have to be? And how mentally sharp do you have to be in overtime in the Super Bowl with a chance to go score a go-ahead touchdown, to think you have something, and basically mid-throw decide you're not going to? Because who knows, that maybe would have ended up in an interception and the game's over. To mid-throw decide not to, reel the ball back in, and then dump it off, get a first down, keep it moving. Eventually you win the game.
And that's part of what makes great quarterbacks great. It's not the plays that they make, it's about the plays that they don't make.
Yes. Yes.
That is, it's seeing what you have and going, all right, I have nothing here. Throw it away. It's
what in my opinion, and I've said this for a while now, in my opinion, it's why Mahomes is entering this like GOAT type of conversation. It's why there's so many great quarterbacks historically that he's already better than. Because we've seen a lot of quarterbacks throughout the years that have similar talent to Mahomes in terms of like big arm, mobile, make a lot of guys miss. That Josh Allen comes to mind.
Yes.
Josh Allen makes a ton of Madden type plays, right? But normally if you have a quarterback like that, it's understood that with those great plays also typically comes great mistakes. And Lamar had this in the AFC Championship game. He was like scared to make a mistake seemingly through most of the game, so he didn't make a lot of the electric plays, and then he's forcing it, and then he throws a terrible interception into triple coverage. For Mahomes to be able to make the kind of video game plays he does, but also pretty much always be an efficient player and not be turnover happy and not be fumble. I mean, think about Trevor Lawrence. If Trevor Lawrence was running as much as Mahomes was last night, just scrambling around trying to find openings, whatever, how many fumbles would he have had?
At least 2.
Right, exactly. For him to be able, because even Brady's the GOAT as of now. Brady's play style didn't cater to what would typically create a lot of turnovers and mistakes, right? Because Brady was very, dice you up, stay in the pocket, 1 read, 2 read, 3, like get the ball out quick. Mahomes will run around now. He'll hang on to the ball, but it's just somehow he doesn't have a lot of turnovers. I know he had the one bad interception yesterday, but for him to just like cut that off and then just figure it out the rest of the game, like that's all-time stuff.
And what makes, on top of what, the plays that he doesn't make that lead to mistakes, is there are so many guys that are super talented that don't work as hard and don't have to watch as much film because they feel like their talent will overcome it. When you get the combination of talent and, watching film and studying your X's and O's like you're a head coach, that's when you get the all-time stuff. That's why Brady was who he is. That's why Mahomes is who he is. And then, you have that gap. Mahomes to the second best quarterback right now is who? Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. And how big is that gap? It's massive.
Yeah,
it's the size of the Grand Canyon.
Right.
So that's Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback going right now. He's entered that Tiger and Michael Jordan, Tom Brady era, and not only you winning your Super Bowls and you winning, being at the best at your level, but everybody else that's good is not winning. Like Josh Allen has won a couple of playoff games. Lamar Jackson's won 3 playoff games since he's been in the league. Phil Mickelson, all the times that he was in the tour, didn't win because of Tiger. Peyton Manning with Brady, he's entering that status. And, looking at next year, it's still early. It's like, how do you not pick the Chiefs to be a contender in the AFC, win the AFC, and go to the Super Bowl?
To three-peat for the first time in NFL history.
Yeah. Wow, he's the first one ever.
If I had to put money on... I mean, I agree with you. If I had to put money on who's going to win the Super Bowl this time next year...
We talked about it on the show today. We were like, who's going to play the Super Bowl next year? And I'm like, Okay, NFC's tough, but it's like AFC. Okay, the Chiefs, the Bengals,
The Bills.
the Bills. It's like, I mean, if I had to put $100 bill on it, I'm not putting the Chiefs on it. The NFC, it's Packers, Lions, Niners, and that's about it. I don't trust the Eagles or Eagles, Cowboys, and I don't really. There's nobody else that's a threat really in the NFC. Nobody in the South. But yeah, that's where Mahomes enters, and it looks like they're only going to get better. I know Chris Jones. Everything that I've heard says that he'll be a free agent, that he'll leave. I don't see, if I'm Kansas City, letting him walk. Belichick's always been one of those guys that I'll give you a second contract, I will not give you a third. God, just the impact he had in that game, I don't see them moving off unless one of these desperate teams is just going to give him a cash cow of money and just to where he's not going to deny it.
As far as I know, Chris Jones is the only guy that they really have to figure out next offseason or this offseason. So like as opposed to like here, like in Jacksonville, like you got to worry about Josh Allen and Calvin Ridley. Like where your priorities lie on those two is obviously different, but like those are still two of your marquee players that you have to figure out. And they weren't even a playoff team. The Chiefs were a Super Bowl team, and they seem to have everybody. I mean, I don't know of another like star player for them that is in a contract next year. So I would believe they're not going to let Chris Jones walk out the door. I mean, we always talk about the window. I know with Patrick Mahomes, you kind of always have the window. As long as he's on your team, you have a window. But man, it'd be nice to have Chris Jones there too for them.
So. And it's like put
it this way: as a Jaguar fan, I really hope he goes somewhere else.
Yeah. And it's what's crazy is like you have so many people that like, you know, they'll read a box score like, you know, Myles Garrett gets the defensive player of the year and they're like, I don't think he had the stats of Josh Allen. It's like, okay, Chris Jones played outstanding yesterday, right? Guess how many tackles he had?
How many tackles he had yesterday? Or
yesterday.
Tackles. He's an interior D lineman. I don't know, 6, 7?
He had 4 tackles, 2 solo. Wow. But the impact he had was the pressure on Purdy twice. One was on the Debo missed touchdown, and the other was on in the one in overtime.
Collapsing the pocket.
Yes, collapsing the pocket. That is something you'll never see on a box score. You won't see. You might see it on next gen stats. The pressures. I've always say like with defensive linemen, like you don't have to tell me your stats. If I can see your impact on the TV. I don't care what Bosa's stats are or a Myles Garrett. I see your impact every play. You know, we played...
Especially if you're an interior guy like Chris Jones.
Yeah, like Aaron Donald, too. Like, the Jags played Myles Garrett, and Ezra Cleveland's never played... He's never played left tackle. He's playing left tackle, and he draws a false start. Like, that's impact. You'll never see that at a box score, but if you watch the game, you see that. All right. I'm kind of done with the NFL. You done? Anything else you want to add to Super Bowl?
I mean, I'm never done with the NFL, but we can be done right now.
So, the Gators... strength and conditioning coach was the strength and conditioning coach Craig Fitzgerald moves on. Apparently had a good relationship with Bill O'Brien at Boston College. Less than ideal for him to move on. I don't know how to put into context what kind of impact a strength and conditioning coach has. I know he's massive because, I mean, right now, like, you're not doing anything on the field throwing the ball because that's the NCAA rule. So pretty much, you know, you're waking up, you're getting your lift in, you're going to class, you're probably getting another lift in the afternoon. Like, this is the most important person right now in the off season before you go to spring ball, and now that guy is gone. I mean, I don't know the strength and conditioning like too well. You know, if Florida decides to hire somebody in house, or if Billy wants to go and get somebody else. You know, going to this year, everybody knows Billy Napier has to have a good year, and this is not the foot you want to go as we're almost in mid-February, as we're about to hit spring ball.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't know. You probably have more insight into this than I do just because you coach now. Like, you probably kind of know how strength and conditioning works a little bit better than I do. I mean, I played in high school, but that's kind of all I would know in terms of what a strength and conditioning program looks like. And obviously in college, when it's way more around the clock in terms of diet and all that, like, that's a huge part of it. I've always felt like strength and conditioning is one of those things where when you're struggling, everyone wants to question it, and when you're good, no one questions
Yeah, well, it's a toughness thing.
Yeah.
So if your team's not tough, well, he's the first guy you point to.
Right. And then, like a good example is when Dan Mullen was coaching at Florida. It was Coach Savage.
Yeah,
was the strength and conditioning coach under Mullen. Everyone loved Coach Savage. Right, they loved his raspy voice and all the clips of him yelling. And those first couple of years, Florida was good. So it was like, oh my God, like this guy is awesome. Like, look at the transformation on these players, and they're developing guys and getting them in. And then in 2021, Florida falls off the ladder a little bit. They're not as good. They have a bad season. Guys get hurt. And all of a sudden, the narrative by the end of the season is, well, Florida has terrible players. They're just physically weaker than the teams they play. And then Mullen gets fired, and it really happens when the coach gets fired. Because Mullen gets fired, and then remember that offseason, there was this narrative that, oh, they eat these box lunches all the time, and they never eat.
Yeah, they eat McDonald's, and they don't eat the meals that they give them to them or whatever.
Yes, and then take it one coaching staff before that. I never heard any. I mean, I don't know if it was really good or not, but I never heard any issues about Jim McElwain's strength and conditioning staff until he left. And then all of a sudden, all these guys come out that, yeah, we had to go get outside training because we didn't trust the strength and conditioning staff in-house. And it's like, okay, was it actually... I find it hard... I know Jim McElwain was not a good coach, but I find it hard to believe that the University of Florida has a strength and conditioning program that bad. Maybe it was that bad. I don't know. But now it's like, oh, the sky is falling. The strength and conditioning coach is gone. I get that it's less than ideal. I totally understand what you're saying. And not having one seems bad.
Yeah. It's not ideal. Like
I don't know really what makes a good one and a bad one, but if I had to guess, not having one is probably bad.
Like, to me, your strength and conditioning coach is the main person that's running your program from the time the season's over, which was December, till you lead up with spring ball. Like, because you're trying to build a muscle mass, you're trying to, you got to get your nutrition. Like, that's everything that the strength and conditioning coach is doing. So you're trying to build that now. So once you get to spring and once you get to summer, everything's already put in place. Players are, your creatures of habit. You know what to expect, and there's no confusion what's going on. The only thing I kind of went to was Scott. I think his name is Scott. What's his name? He went to Scott Cochran. He was at Bama for a long time. Then he left and went with Kirby to Georgia in 2020. I mean, he was pretty good at Alabama, and then goes to Georgia, and now he's doing pretty good at Georgia. And he got there in 2020. So since he got there, Georgia ran back-to-back, and then they just missed out. They were one of the best teams in the country. But again, I can't.
I'd say they're pretty physical.
Yeah, I can't sit here and say, if he weren't there at Georgia and Georgia gets somebody else, are they just as physical and they are just as good? I would tend to say yes, but I kind of go back to the beginning. He's one of your main guys, but I feel like I think Florida could I could be completely talking out of hand, and don't quote me on this. I think Florida could hire somebody that was the second guy, the assistant, whoever it was on the strength and conditioning staff, and that person can take over, and
it's not going to be a 3-win difference.
Yeah, it's not like you're losing. It's not like
an NFL team losing an OC.
Right, that's exactly what I was about to say. It's not like, Andy Reid calls your entire offense and then he's not there because he's sick.
Right,
right. Okay, who's calling plays?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
I would think as well that probably, because look, there's a lot of people that are very, very sky is falling about the Florida football program right now. And I understand why. They haven't been very good in a while now. It's been 3 straight years they've been really disappointing across 2 different coaches. And I think that probably the biggest problem is the narrative and the like what it looks like. any Florida fan is going to be very upset about a coach leaving Florida to go to Boston College if it's not an elevation, if it's not a promotion. If they're going for the same job, then every Florida fan is going to say that something is seriously wrong with Florida. Boston College just hired a former NFL head coach who's got a ton of connections, and they seem to know each other. I don't really know the relationship, but apparently they know each other.
Yeah, they went back to like Penn State and before then too.
And to your point of what we were kind of just talking about, I don't think this is the same as losing your OC who calls your plays. You know, I don't think it's the same thing. And then I would also say with the strength and conditioning stuff, again, I'm not an expert on strength and conditioning. I'm not going to pretend I am. But I do know that probably the biggest impact the strength and conditioning coach has is on the young players. And it's on the true freshmen that have been in high school.
Straight out, yeah.
That you need to get college football ready, SEC football ready. And then as they get into their sophomore year, maybe they haven't played a lot. How do we get them game ready? Like, you know, maybe we had somebody that came in needed to put on 30 pounds. And they put on 20 in their freshman year. Now they need to put on 10 more. Maybe they're switching positions, so they need to actually, you know, lose 10 pounds or whatever. I feel like the young players that aren't where their spot is not totally set in stone yet is where a strength and conditioning coach is going to make the most difference. The problem is particularly on the offensive side of the ball. It's extremely rare, almost never, that a coach publicly is going to throw a player under the bus, especially a young player, right? So if it's like, say it's like a wide receiver that is not playing a lot their freshman year and maybe even in their sophomore year, it might be because they haven't developed physically, because they haven't done everything they need to do, and the strength and conditioning coach would certainly be responsible for that. It might be because they don't know the plays. It might be because they can't figure out where they got to be on the field.
Well, and it could be those on top of not knowing where your classes are, you know, off the field stuff. Like, this is the first time, you know, you're around parties, you're around like all these women. Like, there's so much. Like, college is a walking community that you've never been around, and when you get there, you don't know how you're going to react.
And it's one of those things, like I was saying a minute ago, like any issues like that are underlying that nobody else is going to know about that's not involved in the program. It's always stuff that never comes out until after a coach gets fired, right?
Yeah, or the player will say something 5 years after he leaves.
Right, exactly. And then there's all these things, right? So that's about my extent of strength and conditioning that I know of. Is just like it really feels like one of those things that if things are going well, everyone loves a strength and conditioning coach. Yeah. Because I'll tell you one thing about any guy that's done enough to be a strength and conditioning coach at a big-time college program, they like to yell. That's one thing we know about all of them.
Yeah, they're like defensive coordinators. They're not very calm.
So every fan, every media member is going to fall in love with the clips of them. Let's get better today, and the mic, you'll inspire me. Like, everyone loves that in the offseason. But if Florida has 3 wins by the time the cocktail party rolls around, then whoever the new strength and conditioning coach is, they're going to say is the worst coach ever.
Well, and the strength and conditioning is an extension of the staff. You know, we saw it here in Jacksonville. It didn't ended the way we wanted, and we wanted the entire staff gone. Why? Because it didn't end well. It was all fine a year ago because it was all different. So, yeah, that's all I got. Anything you want to add before we get out of here on this fine Monday?
Dude, you left out the most important part of the Super Bowl.
The halftime show?
We haven't broken down Usher at all, man.
Usher. I thought it was decent.
You were going to go through this whole podcast and not bring up Usher.
Yeah, I thought it was decent.
I thought it was good. I thought it was good too.
I mean, I don't.
You know what's funny?
The best. What's up?
Go. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good.
I was going to say, what's funny about Twitter, and I knew this would happen because it happens every year. Like, everyone has to say that it's the best halftime show they've ever seen, or they have to say that it was hot garbage. And it's like, the last few years, I've come away watching the halftime show being like, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not all time. It's not better than Prince. It's not better than Michael Jackson.
Yeah, or the one they had in L.A. with all the collab of the L.A.
That was sick.
That was, that's the best to me.
It's not better than Beyonce and Bruno Mars, because that was an all-time one in my opinion. But it wasn't terrible. It wasn't trash. It wasn't bad. I thought it was. There's been a lot of Super Bowls. There's been how many halftime shows have there been at this point? Michael was the first kind of one like this.
Mid-early 90s. So you're probably saying 30 years?
Probably like 30-ish, give or take. I mean, it's probably top 10. Maybe back half. Maybe like right outside the top 10, something like that. I mean, I haven't gone through every single...
And I mean, like, as much practice as these people do and as much as the NFL, like, people forget, like, I forget which Super Bowl this was a couple of years ago. The halftime show was the highest rated part of the game.
Oh, God.
Because it's the entertainment.
Yeah.
Like, everybody wants to see the halftime show. Well, that's not a football fan.
Think about it this way, okay? Especially because now, I can tell we're getting older, by the way, because all the halftime shows are like people we know super well.
Yes.
Versus when we were kids, we're like, who the hell is that?
Yeah.
Because they're way too old. And we're going to really be old when we like don't know any of the
yeah, the coming up people. Yeah.
That's what it's going to be like, damn. This sucks.
Yeah, I already feel like that now when I'm around high school kids and I'm coaching and like I'm singing a song from 10 years ago when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And the kids are like, how do you know that song? I'm like, dude, I was your age when that song came out.
Right.
Like, shut up. and I just want to punch them in the face every time they say it. Every time.
I did, probably the highlight of the show, in my opinion, was Alicia Keys coming out with Alicia Keys is so sick. And then the roller skates were pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible. Like, it wasn't.
I mean, to have a coordinated dance group on stage on roller skates or I guess it was roller blades. I think I was gonna make. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that was so cool.
I don't know why. I guess because our film like background, like how they were able to film like while he's on the stage and just go around and like
it was crazy.
It's like. That's what fascinates me the most. That, you know, we probably can't go into discussion where nobody really cares about it. The production of it is the most impressive thing to me. And, you know, it's for TV. And I know somebody, Coach Shields, who was Jaguar Coach of the Year last year, went to the Super Bowl. And, like, it is not good, like, at the game because it's made for TV.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
You know, what are you going to do? I thought it was good. I'm not a big halftime person.
This is a barometer for me. Did you like the Weeknd's show?
I thought it was a little extra.
I loved it.
Okay.
I thought it was that was one of my favorites.
Was that the one in
Tampa?
Okay. Yes.
It was when Brady beat Mahomes.
Yeah, okay.
It was the COVID
year, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And all his dancers and stuff had that weird mask thing on. And I think that was part creative, part because they had to wear masks because it was COVID.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of did a 2-in-1. Like, if we're going to have to wear these, we may as well make some kind
cool.
of fashion statement. Right. And a lot of people were like talking about how dumb that looked and whatever. But like, some of the people got to understand that these are artists. Like, they do weird stuff. That's kind of the point. So if it's weird for you, then that's probably not really going to be your style. You probably were never going to like it anyways. But I thought Usher was really good. I personally think we've had a stretch of really good shows in the last few years. And again, everyone loves to hate and just...
Well, everybody loves to have an opinion.
These are awful. These suck. Blah, blah, blah. No, dude. In my opinion, the last 4 halftime shows have been really damn good.
Travis Scott in Atlanta with...
That one I didn't like.
Bruno Mars and
no.
SpongeBob.
You're just naming people.
Yeah.
Bro.
Well, they were all in Atlanta. So the one in Atlanta was like 4 different people. It was like...
Yeah, Bruno wasn't part of that one, though.
It was Maroon 5.
Yes.
It was Maroon 5 and then
Travis Scott and Big Boy.
Big Boy, that's who it was.
I didn't like that one. I wasn't a fan of that one. That was 2016, I think.
It's one I remember.
Or no, 2018.
Yeah.
I remember it too.
Like it sticks out more than the ones that you were mentioning. Other than the one in LA was my favorite by far. And I don't think I
really like the LA one too. I think, I mean, part of it's obviously personal taste. If you like the music, you're more likely to like the show. But from just like a 10,000 foot view of like just any random given person that's going to watch the Super Bowl and like how you cater to the most people, I think in my opinion, like if I were in charge of NFL halftime shows, That'd be a sick job, by the way.
It's a pressure job.
You need to hire people that are performers, not just musicians.
Yeah, not just singers.
If that makes sense. Or just rappers. Like there's certain, like you and I love Travis Scott, right? I didn't think his halftime show was very good.
No.
At least his like portion. He was with other people, like we said. Maroon 5 was kind of the main thing, but like, because Travis Scott's normal shows, you can't replicate that at a Super Bowl. So it's just going to be him rapping his songs that the general public it doesn't know. The general public doesn't know Biebs in the Trap and Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Right? But like we do, so we think it's awesome.
Yeah.
But like, I think the LA show that you have brought up multiple times is a really interesting show because that show was a lot of rappers that wouldn't be typically thought of as performers, but they collaborated to do something really dope, and it was a sick performance. The way they did it, like 50 Cent being upside down when you zoomed in on him, and Eminem and Dr. Dre being on top of the bus thing, and all the dancers.
Who started it? It was somebody.
Who started the show?
Yeah.
What was it, Snoop? Was it Snoop Dogg?
No, I think Snoop came in after. Oh, anyway. But yeah, that was my favorite. But again, I'm not really I mean, as soon as Kansas City kicked the field goal, I was like, all right, I'm taking a shower. Like
that's why I didn't bring it up, because you didn't watch it.
Well, my dumb behind. So I got pizza and I ate 5 garlic knots before the game, and that was the worst mistake of my life because I was watching the Waste Management Open, and
Dylan said I watched the halftime show because I was on the toilet the whole time,
and I fell asleep for an hour. And I like look at my phone like, oh damn, it's 6:30. All right, the game's about to start. So like I didn't see any of like the national anthem. I didn't see Chris Stapleton. I didn't see none of that junk.
My only complaint about the anthem, America the Beautiful, that Post Malone sang, and then the halftime show, was the sound quality wasn't very good. And like it was almost like the mic that those performers were on, it was like a mic for the stadium, but it wasn't also mic'd to the camera. So it was like you obviously heard them, you knew what they were saying, but it wasn't as like
echoey almost.
Yeah, it wasn't quite as like clear as you would want it to be. So that was my only complaint. That's not the performer's fault. That's more of a CBS thing. But that's the only thing that took away from it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like Alicia Keys, when she comes on, she's going crazy. She's doing her thing. She's belting it out because she's Alicia freaking Keys. And it's like you don't get to truly appreciate it quite as much as you normally would because the sound quality was just not. It wasn't awful. It wasn't like unlistenable. But like if you're expecting 100% sound quality for the Super Bowl freaking halftime show, it was like 80%.
Yeah. So who do you want to see in it next year?
Who do I want to see?
Yeah.
I mean the Jaguars, obviously.
Halftime show.
Oh, the halftime show. I was like, wait, what are we talking about here?
This guy.
Who do I want to see? That's a good question. They'll never let him do it because of the Rihanna thing, but I think Chris Brown would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I think he'd be so good because he's similar to Usher, like has a ton of hits. His stuff is
dance.
And another kind of key to it is it can't be someone that has super explicit music. Because
you got to be for the kids.
Because you just end up bleeping everything out and it doesn't sound very good. You know what I mean? Like, you and I don't care about that, but like the general public, that's not going to work. So his music's actually, especially his old stuff, Chris Brown's when he was older, or when he was younger and it was older music, a lot of it's like plenty clean enough to play. I know Beyonce and Bruno did it again, or they already did it, I mean. So I think they were so good. They might be my favorite ever. I mean, Michael Jackson's my favorite ever, even though I wasn't alive for it. I've seen it, and I think it was just unbelievable. I think Beyonce and Bruno are probably my second favorite.
I'm trying to think of like somebody like early 2000s, late 90s. That was.
Do you think Drake will ever do one?
Eventually.
I think he will too.
And he can put on a show.
But I agree with you saying eventually. Like, I don't think it'll be for a while.
Yeah, you got to wait till we're like in our 40s.
And see, I think so too, which is weird because it's not like Drake is young.
No, he's like mid 30s.
He's probably mid to late 30s.
Yeah, probably
I would
late
have
30s
to imagine.
now.
And you talk about having enough hits. I mean, oh my God.
Yeah.
Drake's got.
I mean, that dude had a.
Dude, imagine a Drake show bringing on Lil Wayne. Like, that'd be so sick. Oh.
Yeah. Lil Wayne would not be doing halftime show solo.
No. I heard a suggestion on Pardon My Take that I like. PFT commenter said that they should do a Ludacris halftime show, but instead of it being Ludacris's songs, it's songs he's featured, and the people that do the songs he's featured all join him.
That would be pretty cool.
Wouldn't that be sick?
Did you see when he was in Atlanta, he came from like the skyscraper,
Yeah.
like the top of the dome,
Yeah.
and that was funny. Atlanta had like a whole, like that day, I forget who they played. I think it was the Saints, maybe, the first time. They brought like all these Atlanta rappers, and like anytime they had a break, like they would just start like singing their song. Like it's so Atlanta.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right. We've been almost an hour, and I'm hungry because I just got done with practice. So
Andy Steiner talking about Super Bowl.
yeah,
halftimes.
that too. All right, that was episode 3 of Denmark and Marsh. Appreciate it. Tell a friend to tell a friend that we do this, talking Jags, Gators, and the big stories. We doing one later this week?
Yeah.
Thursday?
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right,
I'm in.
bet. So catch us later, probably around Thursday. All right. Over and out.